My name is Aksik, aka Annika. Welcome to my channel. Very happy to see you here. And today we're talking about watercolor again. Watercolor and coloring books that don't have the greatest paper. And in this instance, we're talking about Amazon and Coloring Heaven as well, because they both have thin paper. Now, granted, this is Amazon Japan paper, but it's still a thin paper. And like a lot of you have said, and like I have experienced myself, if you try to use watercolor in these, you get those really heavy buckles and creases in the paper. So people just avoid it. And I wanted to show you, just as one option, or kind of a sample, more interesting tidbit, that sometimes using a lot of water is actually a better choice than using as little water as possible. I filmed a couple of clips. I'm going to switch you over to these now, and then we'll talk again at the end. I am using the biggest brush I have, and I am applying water generously to the page. You can see this is Coloring Heaven magazine. It's Vikings edition, and the page is Fenrir. Main thing is to keep your touch very light, not to rub the page, barely touching it, but we need to get this really shiny result. You can see at some stage I will move the page to show you, how shiny it is. It has to be evenly wet. That's the trick, not to get it to buckle. When all the page is evenly wet, you don't get the same sort of a uneven drawing and buckles in the page. You will get some curling, most likely, and if you're not careful drawing, you might get some creases, but you won't get the same type of a buckling that you would get if you would just put the paint onto the paper in certain areas, and other areas would be dry. That's what causes, because some of the fibers are stretching, some of the fibers are contracting, and that's what causes the buckling of the paper when it gets wet, especially paper like that. So here at first I applied cerulean blue just to give some tone to the sky, and a bit of a top of the wolf as well, because I want those sky tones reflecting into the wolf. Very little of that will be left at the end, you'll see. And now I'm applying indigo, which is one of my favorite colors to use for night sky. And in pretty much every watercolor set I have, or watercolors I get, I always want and need to get indigo. That is one of my favorite colors to use. Um, and I just keep applying it. And as you can see, I'm also using big brush, biggest I dare here. And usually it's quite unusual for me to work with a flat brush. I don't know why I decided on that day to go for that flat brush. Um, Mostly I would be using with a round brush, but this one is also totally okay version. And you can see now I had dipped the brush into the water, dried it a little bit, and I'm softening the transition from the light blue to indigo. And now I'm taking a bit of Payne's Gray, and I'm giving the first light tone to the wolf. Because it's nighttime here, most of the tones need to be cool tones, so I'm choosing to go with Payne's Gray as a base for the wolf. And I'm not going to do any shading here, I'm just putting down areas of color. And I want those colors to be kind of blurring and slightly bleeding. You get more cohesive and interesting result this way. And also because now you put the watercolor pigment down everywhere, that pigment will actually help your pencils to grip better. Now, this is the magic of cadmium yellow. It's a very opaque yellow, and technically everything here should become green, because you're applying yellow on top of what essentially are all very blue-toned colors. But because it's such an opaque color and because of the heaviness of the pigment, if you apply it like this, it doesn't really mix, it pushes the other pigments away. So you can create those cool glow effects. I know that it won't really show as much of a glow yet, but when it dries, trust me, it will look like a glow. So it's a good trick to use it like this in wet washes, to just drop it in into little places where you want the glow to be, and once it dries, it will become this glow area. And now you can see I'm still using the big brush. Possibly I should have switched at this stage, but obviously I felt comfortable using the big brush, and I'm using the edge of it, just flipping it the other way and doing the tighter areas. A little bit red. And you can see I'm not avoiding here the wolf's teeth to try to keep them white. Everything here will dry much lighter than it looks like. So the kind of a slightly red, bloody undertone to the teeth is actually what I'm going for. And I'm intensifying the glow of the eyes. I put some extra yellow in there. So now I'm going for the trees. And first thing I'm going to do, this I think is Viridian or Emerald Green. Different sets call it differently, but Viridian definitely, in most sets would have Viridian. So you can use Viridian. And I'm doing the kind of a base of the trees with it, because once again, this is a very cool, vibrant, but cool blue, but because of the wetness of the wash, that vibrancy will be not as prevalent as it would be if we just put it on the paper. So it'll blur slightly and create this kind of a cool and slightly distanced effect. And now I'm putting some warmer green to bring parts of the tree forward. So you can see I'm adding some in the middle of the trees, so you have a mix of a cool green and warm green in those trees, but still keep everything loose. This is just a base. Here I feel that the overall feel is too light because I know the watercolors will dry even lighter than they look there. So I'm deepening the edges of the sky here on the page with more indigo, just to give it a bit more drama, and the effect of the glow of the moon would be more pronounced. And once again, I am softening the edge of the paint there with a clean, damp brush to make sure that it's soft. Amazon paper, even slightly better quality Japanese Amazon paper, is not really meant for watercolors or using water at all. But I'm showing here that it can still be done, the big wash in Amazon book. Basically, keep the page flat and do a wash all over. So you can see the whole page is shiny here. This way there will be less buckles. And here I'm trying to decide on the color. What I'm trying to do here is not do layers of watercolor. I'm trying to establish kind of a color areas, or areas of warmth and areas of cool. So I want to bring that throne forward with the kind of a golden glow, and I want to keep those two elven warriors kind of pushed back a bit and everything else, so the throne would take the central place here, this glowing throne. So what I'm doing for it, that I'm using kind of cool or earthy tones or grays for everything else, and then adding details of kind of really bright cadmium yellow, which will push other colors to the side without, the sky here is blue once again, and I will be adding yellow there, and it will not turn green because cadmium is such a heavy pigment that it just pushes like that on the paper. It pushes other pigments away without really mixing. So you can see here I'm trying to create this kind of a warm glow for this throne. And I'm also kind of, so it wouldn't be only thing on the page that is golden, I'm adding dots of the same gold into the birds, so the eye would move around the page, not just have one place to concentrate on. And then I am using, I could have waited with these branches until the page was drier so it wouldn't spread, but I wanted it to spread. I wanted these kind of loose halos of color around the objects. Now I'm adding more gray to the warriors to, as an undertone to push them back even further, and just tidying up a bit the branches there. And now adding some dark, fairly coolish brown. Actually, that's kind of a mid brown to the roots there. And you can see on the right hand side, because there's gray underneath, the brown also looks cooler. Basic color mixing. And then just using pastel watercolor, which has a lot of white in it and therefore is quite opaque, to drop in kind of faint color into the flowers. And the same thing, I'm using opaque watercolor for the faces. And now I'm adding tiny bits of gold. Once again, as I said, keep the eye moving throughout the page, so the gold wouldn't be only one spot. So I'm adding it to the weaponry of the elves, and then I'm adding green gold to the little dragon there on the tree, which, because of the kind of a glare of the water, the reflections isn't really visible. You can only see shiny things there. But trust me, there's a little dragon there, and it's covered in green gold, and I also let the colors kind of mingle and kind of bleed out of the dragon a little bit. And now I have established color areas and unified the page, plus the watercolor grip for when is there for when I go in with pencils. So back again, and we can talk about the results now. Let's look at the Mountain King first. The page I based here. Here is the base. As you can see, the paper doesn't really have buckles in the area of coloring. I did close it badly and too early, therefore I got a couple of kind of creases here. That was my own fault. I didn't close it properly when it was still, I closed it when it was still slightly damp. That was my problem. And I didn't look properly, so I kind of managed to get some creases here, but that is strictly my fault. Like, you could even, put additional layers here. Because this is Amazon Japan paper, you can see nothing has really come through, except I've managed to get some paint, from it's just a seepage from the top of the page, which doesn't really matter in a double-sided book, to be honest. But as you can see, you could put additional layers here, I would usually probably put another layer of kind of a darker blue here to kind of darken the kind of a halo of blue around the kind of throne or whatever. But yeah, and then you can just go with pencils on top. And because you now have layer of kind of proper, kind of pigment-based watercolor here, the pencil is going to lay down here very nicely. So I always find that, coloring on top of proper watercolor is often much nicer experience than just coloring on plain Amazon paper. And the other one is, now I'm going to show you the Vikings, the Fenrir page. Apocalypse's name. And here is that one. Okay, I already started it. It's not finished, but I have started the page. But you can see even here now, this is coloring cabin paper that does not like water at all. Like if I was just trying to kind of put areas of water, I would get heavy buckling. Because I wet the whole page evenly, it almost works like paper stretching. Okay, if you wet the whole page evenly and put the watercolor down, you won't get, you can see, like there's no heavy buckling really. You might get odd little tiny crease at the kind of a near the binding sometimes if you don't flatten the page properly, which, you know, I was sloppy kind of leaving them on the desk. I didn't flatten them properly. But as you can see, the paper itself, I can show from the top as well, it's not really buckled. You know, it's slightly warped, but that's about it. One thing that is, you know, in the beginning, after it's dried, it kind of tends to curl a bit. So you just, you know, when it's dry, you put it underneath a pile of books or something for a day, and you're sorted. Everything is going to be fine. And because, like, for example, for this wolf, the fen bear, I have only used, you know, because we have the base now, the only pencil I used for shading the actual fur is just black Prismacolor pencil. That's it. That's one pencil I used here. I'm not sure I'm going to put much anything here. I think it suits the image. I might darken certain areas, you know, I'm still working on it. But you can see, super easy. And I did the, you know, the jaws also with Prismacolors. And I put some Posca on the moon there and a little bit of pencil. This is super easy way to give you basically kind of very cohesive base, and going on top of it, the pencils go onto this base like a dream. So, you know, one option, you might try it out. Always try it out on some books that you're not very keen on, you know, because it's always like any skill and like anything you learn, you know, you need to be kind of taking your time and testing things out. But it's an interesting thing to try out, and you can get fun results. So thank you very much for watching. Hope you have a good day or morning or afternoon, whatever the time is in your corner of the world. And bye-bye.